You're listening to Katrina Wills from K Wills Creative, and this is Exploration Echoes, Tales from the Underground. Alrighty, so today I've got with me Michael Mills, who also has an alter ego called Professor Flint that you may have heard of in the cave world. But today I'm mostly talking to Michael about how the world of caves fit into your story. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, and yes, look, it's good that we've sidelined Professor Flint for a little while because I wouldn't be able to get a word in edgewise otherwise.
Absolutely. So how do the world of caves fit into your story? You're a performer. You're not a cave explorer as such.
No, although I like hanging out in caves. I think caves. I've been thinking about it when after the moment you asked me about doing the podcast, and I thought, what is it about caves, and for us as humans, and what is it? There's some really interesting connections there, and my first thought was caves are where dragons dwell.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
caves are they're this little place where you have to go under the ground to you have to crawl your way. I mean, you don't have to crawl your way in with all of them, but just this really interesting. We see them in all manner of stories from Lord of the Rings and elsewhere, but it's the dragons thing, and I think for someone like me that dwells in the telling of the stories of science, they're a wonderful place. Particularly, one of my favorite places to visit is the Narracourt Caves, and I get to and we, because it's sometimes a we get to perform in Blanche Cave, and I've done shows before where you have a backdrop and a projector, but it's like you don't need a backdrop in Blanche Cave. You don't need a set. You don't need to say, hello, the cave is the set. So
Yeah.
I think the great gathering places. I
Yes.
think there's a. I think the consistency of the temperature in them kind of lends itself to this idea. There's a stability and calmness about them. Um, and they're also great places to sit and contemplate. And they're living ecosystems as well. We often think of caves as these things, a place like Capricorn Caves or the Narracourt Caves, where it's like, okay, we find these fossils. This is what was happening long ago, and they're repositories of fossils. It's like, yeah, they're living homes as well. Dragons still live there.
Absolutely.
So yeah, yes,
So
absolutely. I think
when was the first time you performed in a cave?
so it would have been Narracourt, and it would have been as part of the South Australian Museum's Paleontology Week.
Yes.
We try not to think of how many years ago that was.
I'm just thinking back in my head now, and I believe it was around 2004.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, and I yes, 10 years in Flint years or something. Yeah,
Yes.
so I think you're right. I think 2004, and I did some stuff on the lawn there. But it was the first time I started doing shows in Blanche Cave, and I just remember just walking into the cave and going, "What?
Yeah.
This? I'm doing a show in here. What?"
And describe it for our listeners, because not everyone who be listening will have been to Blanche Cave. So describe Blanche Cave.
Well, that's not good enough. So listeners, what are you doing? Go to Narracourt, go to the cave, go to Blanche Cave, go in there, and you get to go at the back and see all kinds of cool things. So with Blanche Cave, you walk down these very steep steps. Try not to bang your head on the kind of rock that's kind of overhead, and it's this beautiful open. It's cathedral-like. I suppose it's the only the way you can describe it. And there's a stage that they put in there, but it's not a stage great big thing with curtains and lights and stuff, but it's just nice enough that it doesn't take away from the backdrop that you see and the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
So it's and there's the old stalagmite and stalactite around the place. It's a big, it's open. The acoustics are extraordinary.
Yes. And you've
Um,
got daylight windows in Blanche Cave. So you're not like you're in this dark, dingy hole. You're in this huge open expanse with
yeah, yeah.
filtered
So
daylight coming in. Yeah, it's incredible.
and it creates its own mood and it creates its own. There is nowhere, and I've performed in lots of places. I've performed on the festival theatre stage. I've done carols by candlelight in Elder Park. I've done shows in like all kinds of shows around Australia. There's nothing like standing on that stage in Blanche Cave
Yeah.
and doing your thing, and having an audience kind of as part of the story. It really is. And I suppose there's almost, we talk about all cave people, which is a bit like a historically somewhat of a myth, but there's an element, I think, of going into a cave to gather socially, whether it's for a performance or some other reason. I think the library do book readings and things down there. So it's
Yeah.
they used to have before World Heritage. They used to have parties down there.
Yes, my
Um,
family, in fact, used to go down there for parties.
but the parties,
And
oh, you're the ones that left the wine bottles all around. So
my one of my great aunts actually used to tell the story of making ice cream in a butter churn down in the cave.
yeah, so they and all that becomes part of the stories of the local Naracoorte community. So I think that's the thing to remember too with caves. So caves, the Naracoorte caves belong to all of us who visit them. We have a connection to it. It belongs to all Australians. They belong to the world as a World Heritage Site, but they also belong to the local community.
Absolutely.
And I think that's always really, really important to remember. Whether it's the Naracoorte Caves or Wellington Caves or Capricorn Caves or some other iconic like at Winton, the Winton fossil sites, the Australian Age of Dinosaurs.
Mm.
All of those places are part of the story of the local people. So and Naracoorte Caves are so cool in terms of I've had the great privilege of or madness, maybe it's madness, of crawling on my belly through one of the caves with Prof Rod Wells. And one of the chaps who found the fossil beds in Victoria Cave.
Yeah.
So all of those sorts of things. The more and I think the more people in the local community do that stuff and visit the caves, the more they connect to it and the better they understand that, yeah, this is part of our story.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've performed in caves.
Yeah. And Capricorn Caves as well, which is very different. It was a smaller cave. You kind of walk across this little bridge thing into this, and this little walk through this little narrow pathway, and it then kind of opens up. But love both of them.
Yeah.
I'd happily do a world tour of singing in caves. Hey, that's an idea.
There's an idea.
Anybody with money listening, talk to me.
And so, was it early in your career that you started performing in caves, or has it come through as in a later stage?
So, oh, so the first question, of course, is when does a career actually begin?
Yeah.
Um, so I started writing poems when I was 7. So not then. Um, look, I think it can really be traced to Paleontology Week with the Naracoorte Caves and the South Australian Museum.
So it's
And I
linked
think that's
to Steve Bourne, isn't it?
yeah. So I think it's really and Liz Reed and the team, and I think
Yeah.
it's why I have such great affection for both of those
Yeah.
places. And because I didn't know that such a thing was possible. And I've done shows in, I've been doing shows at places like the zoo and the Botanic Garden. So doing shows in places other than theatres, and shows in theatres are cool too. But I'd done a whole bunch of shows in a whole bunch of interesting places, and Maritime Museum, on the Ketch in the Maritime Museum, because the set is part of the story. So to do a show in a cave. Um, it was only 10 Flint years ago, or 20 Michael years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and it I think it kind of burns itself onto your soul, in terms of the impact of the experience, because you are reminded that when you do a show at a museum, you're doing a show in a place where the fossils have been prepped in some cases and delivered. When you're doing a show at Naracoorte in Blanche Cave, or you're doing a tour, and I've done some tours there as Prof Flint, um, but if you're doing a show in Blanche Cave, you're doing a show in a place where the fossils that go to the museum are found.
Yeah.
And that's a profound difference,
It's huge, isn't it?
So it's a massively profound difference. And I think as a performer, as a writer, for me, it's so important to be aware of that and acknowledge it, because it is not like anything else. Um, it's I've done, as I say, I've done shows in museums all around Australia, and museums are remarkable places, and their collections are extraordinary. But the difference is, with somewhere like the Naracoorte Caves, it's in situ. You're there. It's like, I've been on fossil digs, and every now and then we break out into song. And yes, it's Professor Flint songs, and I apologize profusely. I don't. In fact, it's not always me that starts. It's not always me that initiates the song.
Yeah.
Um, we actually did that in. I was at an event in Naracoorte a few years ago, where they had cave guides that came, and they did some interp training and talking about, how do you do better tours. And we went on a tour in one of the caves, and with the hard hats on and the crawling on your tummy thing, and we're in this little tiny alcove. We all started singing the Thylacoleo song, and I think there is video of it somewhere, but it's just that moment that we're like, 20 meters under the ground or whatever, and we're going, Thylacoleo, whoa, whoa. And I remember thinking at the time, how did this happen to be my life?
Yeah.
But so very grateful, because, as I said, I think there's something profound about performing in the place,
Yeah.
where and caves are such a cool example of that. I mean, I'm this coming June, I'm going to be in Lyme Regis,
Wow.
um, on the Jurassic Coast. Lyme Regis is where my science hero Mary Anning did
Yeah.
all her discoveries. I'm there doing a show as Professor Flint, singing a song about Mary Anning in her hometown.
Incredible.
That's mad. And but in a cool way, it's you hold on to these experiences. And then I'm doing a presentation the following day about Mary Anning, and the show and the album that we did for the Fringe a couple of years ago and stuff. So, but caves, and because I know obviously this is a cave podcast, so I keep
Yeah.
coming back to cave. But I think these are useful examples that illustrate the degree to which caves are such a unique and remarkable place to perform.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
And
how they
and
can lead into so many other things.
yeah, and because and things too, so you can do the show in the cave. You finish the show, and for me, it's always you stick around and talk to the audience, and if they want photographs or autographs, you do that until the last person leaves. Um, and but then the audience can book and do a tour
Mm,
of that cave or one of the other caves in the vicinity. And if the show's been about the animals that are discovered in the caves, and I think that's the key thing too, the narrative of the show. It's not in I'm not in the cave doing Shakespeare.
mm.
And I think doing
Which
Shakespeare in the
has
cave
been
is
done.
cool. And I think, orchestras doing things in caves are cool and fantastic, but that's not my shtick. My
No,
shtick is like, what are the stories of this place?
yeah,
What are the stories born of this place that I can sing about? So I think that's what makes it um, quite a different thing to doing the Shakespeare thing.
yeah,
Um, because it's not just plonking a show. And when I say that, I shouldn't be so dismissive of the Shakespeare folk because they do really cool stuff.
they do.
Um,
But
but it's not my thing.
yeah,
Although I am going to the Globe while I'm in London to see Romeo
really,
and Juliet.
wow.
Mad. Um, so I think that there are a number of different elements and threads to this that the caves are remarkable and extraordinary. The show for me needs to be born of the content, and the narrative needs to tell something about the caves and include the caves because that's the set that you've got, and you're not going to get a better set. Like humans create remarkable things, and maybe I'll see some shows in Broadway while I'm in London. But no, not Broadway, West End, whatever, same thing. But none of those compare with what nature's built over thousands of years.
Mm,
And the intricacy and the natural history that dwell in those places, and that is, as we talked about earlier, is ongoing.
yeah. So tell me a bit about your link with Flinders University because you've done a bit of work with the guys there too, haven't you?
Yeah, so they go on field trips and sing my songs in the car. Um, just for the new first years, it is a rite of passage at times.
Yes.
Uh, Um, so look, the Pallies are both Flinders and Adelaide. I have a really good relationship with them, and some of that relationship is simply, and like with Flinders, it's doing. So when COVID was on, I don't even know how that. Yeah,
Hmm.
2020. 2 years ago. The um, so I did and Dinosaur University became a thing. So I did a whole bunch of interviews, Zoom interviews with a whole bunch of paleontologists, starting with Flinders because that's who I know the most.
Yeah.
Um, Telling stories about Mary Anning and stuff, but we've subsequently done a bunch of projects where for National Science Week we did an online uh, debate, the Great South Australian Fossil Debate, but we ended up getting two paleos from Flinders, one from the museum, two from the Uni of Adelaide. Um, Mind you, that was in four people, so because one person kind of did a couple of the places,
Yeah.
but it was a great collaborative effort. But we also had in the room monitoring social media stuff and putting out tweets and things. Um, People, the paleos from Flinders Uni and Uni of Adelaide. But the other thing for me that's really important too is that I don't get to write songs about Palakestes or Diprotodon or anything in this space without the research
Yeah.
of the team at Flinders Uni or University of Adelaide or Queensland Museum or wherever. My job is to look at their research and come up with ideas and create a thing. But wherever possible, and that's generally most cases, you get the content, for want of a better description, peer reviewed. So I can confirm my albums are peer reviewed.
Ooh.
But we did. So I put out a Megafauna album last year.
Yes.
Um, Dancing with Diprotodons, and we literally, I'd written, and I had a couple of weeks before the deadline, and I literally took the songs and the lyrics down to Flinders University. We sat in the library, Terry Burke, um, Dr. Aaron Kamens, Dr. Diana Fusco, and I played the songs and they had the lyric sheets and I said, okay, tell me what I need to fix.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Um, and the cool thing is because you pay attention to the science they've given you in the first place,
Mm.
you get most of it right. But there were some things that's like, or some words that I hadn't quite pronounced right. And that was
That's the
really
big
annoying
one, isn't
because
it? Getting those words
uh,
pronounced
uh,
right. Oh boy.
dear scientists, can you not call it something with 19 syllables and no vowels? Can you just call it Brenda? Um, so yeah, and that relationship is ongoing with Flinders, where we constantly chatting about ideas and possibilities, and constantly chatting with University of Adelaide paleo researchers as well about possibilities, and obviously Liz Reed, who's at the Uni of Adelaide, and her connection to the Naracoorte Cave. So those things for me are so very important that
Yes.
as I say, I don't get to do this without them because you know you're almost like you become a custodian of the stories that they're uncovering.
Yeah. Yeah. And what mighty interesting stories are they?
Oh, absolutely, and it's fascinating when you're having a conversation with a palate because of their passion
Yes.
and but also their jargon. So my job is to to kind of get through the jargon and go, so what's the really cool things? What's the bit? And the way that I've generally operated, and every now and then I've had people say, oh, shouldn't you study paleontology? Shouldn't you? It's like, no, I don't want to be so far in it that I can't see it from the outside.
Mm.
For me, it's cool to read the stuff and listen to the things and go, oh, that's really interesting. And that's the bit that becomes the song.
Yeah.
I've learned to trust my instinct for going, oh, that bit about that bit about Palakestes where it's this weirdo, but weirdo is cool. So the whole song, there's a song, the song about Palakestes on the album is about. I mean, ultimately, as I'm writing it, and this is the cool thing too in writing, you start off because I got all this information that Palakestes is just weird. We're not quite sure where it fits, but it's really cool. And I've gone, I reckon there's a whole bunch of kids that feel that way.
Yeah.
And
How do
that
you?
kind of became that was not the plan in writing the song.
Yeah.
But as you're writing it, that kind of becomes apparent as a subtext. And you listen to the song and it's not hitting you on the head with the hammer. It's just saying Palakestes is really cool, and the fact that it's different to anything else, that's so cool. And kids that are in that place where they're different and often persecuted would listen to a song like that or a similar narrative and go, yeah, different is cool.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, how something that started off as performing in botanical gardens and in on stages in theatres and that sort of thing can then relate to the well-being of children.
Oh, absolutely. And it's for me the writings of all of the bits, the writing's my favorite bit because you discover things as you're writing something that are not planned when you start writing the thing.
Yeah.
Your writers don't we don't go, right, I'm going to write a song about this and it's going to do this and this is oh, you can kind of start with that, but you need to be free and flexible enough that it's like you're driving down the highway. No, I'm driving down the Palakestes highway song. It's like, "Oh, over there," and you take the dirt road.
Yeah.
Because that looks really cool and interesting, and that you might end up back on the highway, but it doesn't matter if you don't. So,
Yeah.
um, and then you pull over on the side of the road, and there's a cave, and then you stick your head in the cave, and there's a dragon that starts eating your face, and yeah. Oh, that escalated. My goodness.
Oh my goodness. And the nightmares for the children continue.
Yes. Sorry, children, if you're listening. Sorry. Sorry.
But caves are magical places. And, is there a certain cave that you would say is your favourite, or is that too hard to choose?
Um, I think, well, I mean, it kind of is, but it's like people sometimes ask me my favorite song. It just
Mm,
depends on the day, or my favorite show that it's like depends on the day, or my. But I mean, Blanche Cave will always have a special place
yes.
because of the performances that I've done there and the connections to the audiences that come to see the shows. So
Mm,
that's for me why, and all of that stuff that we've talked about. So Blanche is absolutely up there. But Victoria Cave too. And Victoria Cave because I've Rod Wells and Grant Cottrell become friends. These are the folk that 15 years ago discovered Victoria. That's Flint years,
in Flint
25 Flint
years,
years.
for sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But they're the folk that discovered that remarkable fossil bed, and to visit the cave to see where they've gone. And I've visited the cave multiple times. When I was there for during the Fringe, I led a tour
Mm-hmm.
in Victoria Cave. And the cool thing is, it's like, okay, I've learned enough about the little bits that you can stop at to be able to tour the cave, and riff with the public and stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, I recorded a podcast there
With Rod, didn't you?
with
Yeah.
Rod sitting in the place where he had sat 50 years beforehand.
Yeah.
And while the podcast is an audio thing, the audience know that we're sitting in the cave. We knew we're sitting in the cave. And so that
Mm-hmm.
informs in the same way that doing a show in a cave, sitting in the cave with Rod informed how the conversation went and the feel of the conversation. And I think informed the warmth of it because for me, it was this I'm sitting in a cave with the guy. I mean, yes, he's my friend and we have wine together sometimes,
Yeah.
but but I'm sitting in the cave with the guy who dragged himself on his stomach through that hole over there
Mm-hmm.
and came across this thing and went, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean those two, I think. Um, but then there's I should probably do a international tour of shows in caves. Hey, I
Oh,
wonder if there are caves in England. Probably are.
oh, there is.
I'm sure. That's a, I'm gonna have to speak to my cave people. Oh, that's
Definitely.
that's you as well, isn't it? Yes. Hey, cave people out there, where in England can I go into a cave and sing a song?
Absolutely. I'm sure we could find somewhere for you.
Yeah. On the Jurassic Coast, so long as it's not those cliffs that Mary Anning used to climb up that collapse and killed her dog and her father.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No.
No.
Unless it's just Flint that we lose, and then I'm all right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's
So,
how it works.
so there'd be a lot of disappointed children though, and adults now who were once children who knew the professor in his early years. Uh,
He never had early years.
my daughter included,
Oh
and
dear.
son, who just loved the professor when they were there at the Narracrook Caves when I was guiding there.
Oh dear. So sorry.
But that was one of the most astounding things, I think, for me was seeing just the number of children that came to that first paleontology week.
Yeah. And again, it was a community thing, you know.
Yeah,
I think it's really, really important, and Tom and the team and Barb and the team that are running the Narracrook Caves at the moment seem to get it that community matters,
absolutely.
and in inviting the local people in to become part of the story because they are, and that ongoing connection. I think that stuff is really, really important. And it's good for tourism too, because people go into they're going to the pie shop, and it's like the pie people are saying, have you been to the caves?
Yeah, and
Or you're stopping the set and all that sort of stuff. So it kind of supports itself.
it does, and it is a special place and something to be cherished by all in the local community.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the longest amount of time that you've spent in a cave?
4 years. It's a long. It it's not something I like to talk about. I I was I was 12 at the time, and my parents were getting quite cross because I was playing guitar all the time, and they took me to a cave. I think it was Nowcourt, and they just left me there. There was a little lid, put a little lid on the top, and a sandwich, and I had to nibble on that sandwich over a period of 4 years. But everything worked. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know, but
Because when you've been down doing excavations with the Flinders Uni crew, how long do you spend down there?
so hours at a time. I mean, paleontology, paleotics are really interesting. And I'll use Emu Bay,
Yeah,
which is not a cave, but
no, but still
you could dig
related.
a hole big enough and make it. But it's the point of the paleo dig, is that or South Walker Creek, where I've been, where it's a megafauna place in Queensland, and you're there for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah,
And you'd think before if you haven't done it before, you'd think, oh, that's going to be boring. Oh God! And you're like, no, you're nattering and you're finding things, and then every now and then there's a hush, and
yeah,
there's a hush because somebody's gone, oh, I don't quite know what that is.
yeah.
I mean, that's the cool moment, whether it's in a
It
cave
is.
or whatever. That moment on a fossil dig where you find, oh yeah, like in Emu Bay, it's like, oh right, another red lichia trilobite, lovely. We've got 24 million of those, great. Oh, we'll just put it over there in the big pile of red lichias, lovely. And then what? What's that?
Yeah.
I've not seen that before.
Mm.
So it's those moments. Um, and but how long in a particular cave? I think the most time I've spent in a cave is probably when I've done multiple shows in Blanche, and there's just no time between shows to get out, so you just go and chill out, and it's not a bad backstage.
Yes.
Um,
And
so as we
caves
talked about
are.
before, with Blanche, behind the stage, there's a tour walk that they do,
Yes.
and you can and you go, and there's a dig site at the back and stuff, and it's a really cool, easy walk. You get to see lots of different things, but that's backstage.
Yeah. It's not some dark, dingy closet like a backstage of a normal theatre.
That's right. Although it doesn't have a bar like the green room at the festival
Yeah.
centre, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I must say it's not quite like some theatres I know.
If we could, if we could, if we could get somebody to look into that, that would be fantastic.
Maybe I need to speak to Barb and Tom about that.
Yes, yes, have that chat. Yes.
Yeah, but caves are remarkable places for winding down and almost going into a form of meditation, aren't they?
Yeah. So you do the show, and you it's such a once the audience have left, there's a moment, well, there's a period of time afterwards where you can just relax and look around you, and you're looking at you know caves that have formed over millions of years.
Yeah,
And it's that stuff. And I think there's the great and humans, we construct things and they're fancy and cool, but there's something about relaxing in a cave after a show again, which is not quite the same as relaxing in a green room in a theater. And the other thing I always do in a show, um, and doing it in a cave adds that extra element of the wondrousness of the space is that before the audience come in, I'll always stand on the stage and have a bit of a walk around and have a look at where the audience will be,
Hmm.
where they're currently not, but where they will be. And you've got all these empty chairs, but you know that in a period of time, all those chairs are going to be full, and all the people that have come into that cave or that theatre, they could have been doing anything else that day. You know, they could have been doing the ironing, the shopping. They could have gone to a cake place down the road. They could have been in the park. They could have. There are lots and lots of other things they could have been doing at that moment, and they've come to see you do your thing. You
Yeah.
know, and to performers everywhere, always remember that. You know, whether it's in a cave or on a stage, but there's something, you know, because in a cave you're looking at the magic of the surrounds of this theatrical space. And I remember in Capricorn Caves when I performed there for Science Week, I think about 5 years ago.
Hmm.
We'd set everything up, and just before the audience came in, just looking around, just going, "This is like mad." Again, but in a like what like wow, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Um, and you remain ever humble because you're in places that have formed, as I say, you know, we take a few years to build a theatre, and there are some great theatres, and you know, one of the things I'm looking about forward to in about going to London is going to places like the Globe and seeing some of these old theatres on the West End, and they're great and they're fantastic, but none of them are 500,000 years old or millions of years old. None of them had
Mhm.
animals wandering through them. Although the ground, of course, upon which these theatres in the West End, they would have had, you know, bison and things walking across them 15, 20, 30,000 years ago. Because I think it's always important to remember that wherever we are, there are animals that walked and flew and slithered
Yeah.
and burrowed and lived in the caves underground and over the ground and flew in the sky. So we don't dwell in an empty space. We dwell in the shadows of everything that has lived in the place where we live before us. So, but it's much more apparent in somewhere like Naracoorte
Yeah.
because the fossils are just over there.
Yeah. And you can see them.
Yeah,
That is very, very profound.
it happens sometimes.
Well, I think we might finish up there, Michael, unless you have anything else that you'd like to add.
Oh, not well, unless you wanted to ask Professor Flint anything.
Well, let me
I,
see.
I could see if he's available.
Okay.
Oh, he's over there. He's sitting in the corner. He's been sitting there for the last half an hour, just tapping his fingers, going,
Um,
hmm.
when are you going to let me in on this conversation? So, okay then. What what's Professor Flint's favorite moment in a cave?
Are you talking to me now? Or are you talking to Michael? Oh, hello, Professor Flint here. Hello. Thanks, Michael, for speaking for 40 minutes, so I don't get to say very much at all. That's good. So my favorite moment in the cave. Um, I think I think it is walking. Well, there's a couple. One more general and one specific. Walking into Victoria Cave, having spent time with Rodwell's beforehand, chatting, walking into it and walking and seeing the fossil bed that he had seen with his eyes, you know, 50 years beforehand. I think there's something magical about that. And looking at the remarkable number, the assemblage of fossils of different creatures that through very different way, well, through similar ways, I suppose, ended up in that cave. But the number of different species that are kind of in this massive graveyard, this story of what these animals were and how they lived, and that's what this stuff tells us. So that's one thing. one moment that I remember and carry with me. But the other is, during, and it's a more general thing. It's when you're doing a show and you finish the show, and it's fun doing the shows and people singing and dancing and doing all that stuff, and they're learning along the way. But it's after the show. It's after the show where you get young kids wanting to chat to you and ask you questions. You're seeing lights going on in terms of kids and grown-ups, but kids making connections to the stuff that you've been talking about. And during the Fringe, we did a show, Professor Flint and the Dinosaur Hunters. And the Dinosaur Hunters are three remarkable young women that we now call the Ammonites. They're their own separate band. And there's some stuff we're going to be doing with them. And my favorite moments of the whole show was after the show. Well, firstly, watching them perform while I'm side of stage and I'd finish my bit, but finishing the show and being able to stand back and watch the young kids asking them the questions, getting photos with them um, instead of me. I've just loved seeing those connections and thinking, I think we're making something really cool here.
Yeah.
Um, particularly young girls seeing smart, intelligent, funny young women performing and telling the stories of science. That
Mm-hmm.
I think for me is absolutely and I've been doing things. Yes, it's 20 years, Michael, so deal with it. So I mean, what a man, baby. So I've been so but lots of fantastic experiences across all of those years with Naracoorte in the caves. But that for me struck me, and obviously it's proximate in terms of time, so that kind of has it more front of mind. But that struck me as a beautiful moment.
Mm. And so tell me, 20 years ago, did many people even know what megafauna were? Or were they more concerned about dinosaurs?
Oh, look, um, they knew very little. We've still got a long way to go, both with Australian dinosaurs and Australian megafauna. It's not unusual for me to go and do a show, and say, okay, who can tell me the name of an Australian dinosaur? And I'll get T-Rex and I'll get Stegosaurus and a whole bunch of other things. Sometimes I'll get a crocodile, which is not even a dinosaur, or a pterosaur, which is a flying reptile, not a dinosaur. But that tells us that we, you know, and one of the things I say is like, don't get me wrong, T-Rex is cool. T-Rex is fantastic. But can we also learn about the stuff that lived here in Australia? Or when I'm in Lyme Regis, which I'm doing later in the year, I think Michael mentioned it. So when I'm there, I'll be telling them about Australian dinosaurs, but I'll also be saying, oh, by the way, you found some amazing things here in Lyme Regis, as you probably know. So I think we've got a long, 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 long way to go in terms of getting these things into the public psyche. Is that the word? Front of
Yeah.
mind. We want the front of mind, not just people struggling. I was at a library last week and I said, oh, who can give me the name of an Australian dinosaur? And it was cool. One of the grown-ups said, oh, Matabarosaurus. It's like, oh, great, good. That's good. You've remembered what? That's good. That's a good start. But there's lots of them. But there's lots of megafauna. Lots of people, seem to have heard of Diprotodon as a giant wombat thing. I mean, it's not a giant wombat; it's kind of a different group, but at least they know a bit. But
Yeah.
we love Ice Age, we love all of those movies. But it's like, yeah, what about Ice Age Down Under, Dinosaurs Down Under, all of this stuff, the stories. And it's a bit funny coming from somebody that speaks like this. But then, Australia is a place of diversity. So we come from all places. And I think one of the cool things about being Scottish and coming to Australia as a kid is going, wow, do you know what you've got here?
Yeah.
And I think we're still awakening as Australians to the remarkable stories that we have here. I mean, people have been telling stories in Australia for 60,000 years or more.
Mm.
And some of those stories are megafauna stories. Stop and listen.
Yeah. There are some amazing stories out there of the megafauna, and it's certainly something I've seen a change in over the years. Certainly from when I first saw you, Prof, at Naracoorte, um, getting kids aware of there are things other than dinosaurs.
Yeah, I think the thing too is that as those kids grow up, you hope that they retain at least some memory of some of that stuff, so
Yeah,
that if they see, I mean, the ABC did a really cool series recently where they did um, a half a dozen little short videos on Megalania, Diprotodon, Coptodon, Goliath, and a bunch of things. Palakestes, weirdo. Cool weirdo.
yeah,
And so there's more and more stuff out there. And as it happens, I made sure that the six um animals that ABC have done videos of, there's a song for each of those animals on the album. Dancing with the Protodons. And the last of those was Palakestes, because I thought, oh, I've done all of them, and I checked. I've gone, oh, they've done a video on Palakestes, so I had to quickly write that song. Um, but it's probably my favorite song on the album. Anyway, so yes, so it's just it's this cool little positive kind of personal identity thing.
yeah,
Um, but yes, we embrace our stories because they're ours. The
yeah,
stories of us.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Professor, and of course, Michael Mills.
Thanks. Yeah, the prof's just he's just gone back to sit in the corner now.
Okay, fantastic.
Probably waiting for his next media appointment.
Yes. Well, it's been a delight
So
to
that
have you on the show, and
absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me and for doing what you're doing with this podcast in sharing stories of these remarkable places.
yeah, we all have some unique stories to tell.
Indeed.
Yeah. That was Michael Mills and Professor Flint, a wonderful performer who has caves as part of his story and who loves to tell the stories of the caves that he performs in, of the animals that once roamed the areas he performs in, and who has helped to educate people and the general public especially. I know there's certainly quite a few young adults out there now who would have seen him at that first paleontology week at the Naracoorte Caves, and can assure you that performances like his helped to change the direction of their career path, perhaps. It's wonderful people like Michael who bring science into the forefront, and by doing it in caves, brings caves to the forefront. So we thank you, Michael, for all your hard work over the years, and look forward to many more adventures with you.